Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram
Hare
Hare
Ram, Ram
जय
Hare
श्री
Hare,
कृष्ण
Hare
चैतन्य
Krishna,
प्रभु
Hare Krishna, Krishna.
श्री अद्वैत गदाधर सदी गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदानेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि प्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जय मुदीरे। बोलो श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की जय।
Jai.
बोलो श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय।
Jai.
हरे कृष्णा अजय।
Hey, Hare
Hare
Krishna
Krishna.
everyone.
जी हरे कृष्ण
कृष्णा तरुण। हेलो ज्योति। हरे कृष्णा।
Hare Krishna.
कृष्णा। हेलो सचिन।
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So hopefully everyone had a nice summer weekend, and then now we have winter again. But hopefully everyone had a nice weekend. And we were reading. We are reading Canto 3, अध्याय 30th. और कल हम लोगों ने 15th श्लोक किया था. एंड जैसा कि हम लोग पढ़ रहे हैं अभी तक कि कपिल देव is giving transcendental knowledge. क्या ट्रांसेंडेंटल रहस्य मदर देवहूति को समझा रहे हैं क्या. So in the beginning he explained the material nature, 24 elements, Mahat Tattva, the time, the Kal, and how all the things comes together. Then he explained what is the nature of devotional service, right? Like what does it mean to really do the devotional service? Bhakti kya hai? And then he explained the characteristics of a devotee. Like who is a pure devotee and what does he do? How does he live? What is the real goal in life? And then he actually mentioned that the highest perfection in human life is a pure devotee. Yeah. So to be a pure devotee, achieving that, not being the richest person in the world, that is also an achievement, but that's just such a temporary arrangement, right? As we have seen, people keep, and it doesn't really matter whether you have 1 billion or 100 billion, right? But the topmost, the purest thing is to be the topmost devotee, the pure devotee of the Lord. And he explains what are the characteristics of that devotee. Now what Kapil Muni is saying is that a lot of people, and in fact maybe, I don't know, whatever, 85%, 90%, whatever, are so stuck in the material world that we are just so busy in our day-to-day routines and day-to-day, eating and working and all that, that we don't even think about the spiritual life. Yeah. And we don't think that this human being is a chance, the human form which we have got is the biggest opportunity to really get out of this cycle of 8.4 million births and deaths. So we don't think that. And then what happens is what Kapil Muni is explaining. So Kapil Muni is explaining that the person who is totally into the materialistic world, he goes through what? He enjoys this life, but then what happens is what is being described here, right? So directly from avatar of Lord Vishnu. So कल हम लोग ये पढ़ रहे थे, and same thing, basically what Kapil Muni is saying, that an attached family man wants his family members to carry him in a great procession even after his death. And Kapil Muni is describing a normal person, right? Who doesn't understand the spiritual world. and doesn't do any devotion. So, and although he will not be able to see how the procession goes, yeah, he still desires that his body be taken gorgeously in procession. So thus, he's happy without even knowing where he has to go when he leaves his body for the next life. So he's still more concerned about how people will carry him and all those things, right? But not really worried about where is he going, where he is going in his next life, is what Kapil Muni is describing. Yeah. So we'll start the next shlok 16. Anilji.
जी हाँ। वायनोत्क्रमतोतार कफ संरुद्धनाडिकः काशश्वासकृतायासः कंठे घुरघुरायते. In that diseased condition, one's eyes bulge due to the pressure of air from within, and his glands become congested with mucus. He has difficulty breathing, and upon exhaling and inhaling, he produces sound like gura gura, a rattling within the throat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So in the old age, what Kapil Muni is saying is a person, the time flies, everyone gets the old age, and then, those are the conditions which people go through. Yeah. Tarun?
शयानः परिशोचद्भिः परिवितं स्वबन्धुभिः वाच्यमानो पीनभृते कालपाशवशं गतः. In this way, he comes under the clutches of death and lies down, surrounded by lamenting friends and relatives. And although he wants to speak with them, he no longer can because he's under the control of time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it says here, Kalpashvasha, in the control of the time, because the time has passed, the age is there, and in that particular age, not able to even speak up. Ajay?
एवं कुटुंब भरणे व्यापृत्यात्मा जितेन्द्रिय मियते रुदताम स्वाना मुरुद्वेद दयनास्तथि. Thus the man who engaged with uncontrolled sons in maintaining a family dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He dies more pathetically, in great pain and without consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Uncontrolled senses. Yeah. So the whole life without any controlled senses, right? And even if doing everything for the family and for whatever, right? For the world. Yeah. This is what happens. Actually, it's pretty nice purport. So let's read this. Sachin.
In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that at the time of death, one will be absorbed in the thoughts which he cultivated during his lifetime. A person who had no other idea than to properly mentor his family members must have family affairs in his last thoughts. That is a natural sequence of a common man. A common man does not know the destiny of his life. He is simply busy in his flash of life, maintaining his family. At the last stage, no one is satisfied with how he has improved the family economic condition. Everyone thinks that he could not provide sufficiently. Because of his deep family affection, he forgets his main duty of controlling the senses and improving his spiritual consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Right. So because so busy in everything, forget to improve the spiritual consciousness, really to do the self-realization. And of course, we know nobody is ever satisfied with anything, right? And that's what happens. So just read this, Tarun.
Sometimes a dying man entrusts the family affairs to either his son or some relative, saying, "I'm going, please look after the family." He does not know where he is going, but even at the time of death, he is anxious about how his family will be maintained. Sometimes it is seen that a dying man requests the physician to increase his life at least for a few years, so that the family maintenance plan which he has begun can be completed. These are the material diseases of the conditioned soul. He completely forgets his real engagement to become Krishna conscious and is always serious about planning to maintain his family, although he changes families one after another. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So we know that, right? As a conditioned soul, what happens? Everybody, and as you know, Kapil Muni here is Hare Krishna, Rinaji. So,
Hare Krishna, Bhaiya.
Krishna. So, Kapil Muni is describing how a conditioned soul or people who are totally into the material consciousness, right, and has no idea about the spiritual consciousness, what happens in the life cycle, and it becomes the old age comes, and then this is what happens. And says that although he changes families one after another, what does that mean really, right? This really basically means that it's the cycle of birth and death. The new birth happens in a new family, new species, maybe not human being, maybe somebody else, right? And we know this whole 8.4 million species again and again described with the number. So we don't know that, and we are just busy in maintaining the families, right, in that particular scope of life, instead of also worrying about the Krishna consciousness. And this is what Kapil Muni is saying, that this is the normal condition of a conditioned soul. Yeah, that's what he is describing right now. Jyoti?
यामदीथौ तथा प्राप्तौ भीमौ सरवासिक्षणौ स दृष्ट्वा त्रसदुदयः शकृन्वा मूत्रं विमुच्यति. At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Jyoti. So it says here, at the time of death, the Yamdutas become the custodians of those persons who have strongly gratified their senses. They take charge of the dying man and take him to the planet where Yamraj resides. The conditions there are described in the following verses. Yeah. So it's continuously describing like how things work. Rinaji?
यातना देह आवृत्य पाशैर्बद्ध्वा गले बलात् नयतो दीर्घमध्वानं दण्डयं राजभटा यथा. As a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by the Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with a strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. And actually, let's read this purport, Ajay.
Every living entity is covered by a subtle and gross body. The subtle body is covering of mind, ego, intelligence, and consciousness. It is said in the scriptures that the constables of Yamaraja cover the subtle body of the culprit and take him to the abode of Yamaraj to punish in a way that he is able to tolerate. He does not die from this punishment, because if he died, then who would suffer the punishment? It is not the business of the constables of Yamaraja to put one to death. In fact, it is not possible to kill a living entity because factually he is eternal. He simply has to suffer the consequences of his activities of sense gratification. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So with material consciousness, Kapil Muni is describing how things work. Sachin?
तयो निर्भिन्न हृदय स्तर्जनाय जार्तवै पथुः पथि श्वभिभर क्षामाण आर्तो अद्य अगम स्वमु Swamuno Smaran. While carried by the constables of Yamraj, he is overwhelmed and trembles in their hands. While passing on the road, he is bitten by dogs and he can remember the sinful activities of his life. He is just terribly distressed. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So see how Kapil Muni is describing what happens, you know, how the life ends of a materialistic person and then how things work. Yeah. क्षितट परितो कर देवनान लालिने है संतप्यमान है पथि तप्त वालुके कृच्छेन सृष्टे कस्याच ताड़ितश चलत शक्तो अपि निराश्रमोदके. Under the scorching sun, the criminal has to pass through the roads of hot sand with forest fires on both sides. He is whipped on the back by the constables because of his inability to walk, and he is afflicted by hunger and thirst. But unfortunately, there is no drinking water, no shelter, and no place for the rest on the road. Yeah, on the way. Anilji?
जी तत्र तत्र पतच्छ्रान्तो मूर्छितः पुनरुत्थितः पथा पापीयसा नीतस्तरसा यम साधनम. While passing on that road to the abode of Yamraj, he falls down in fatigue, and sometimes he becomes unconscious. But he is forced to rise again. In this way, he is very quickly brought to the presence of Yamraj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Rinaji?
Yes, we are just 1 minute.
बड़ा करूं क्या?
Yes. Yojananam sahasrani navatim नव चाध्वनम त्रिभिर्मुहूर्तेर द्वाभ्याम va nitah prapnoti yatana. Thus he has to pass 99,000 yojanas within 2 or 3 moments, and then he has at once engaged in the torturous punishment which he is destined to suffer.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So Kapil Muni is describing as a materialistic person throughout the life, sense gratification, no spiritual consciousness, no devotion. At the end, this is what happens. It says here, Yojananam Sahasrani, that is like Navatim Nav. So even the distance is described, right? Like if you see 99,000 yojans is how far the Yamraj is from the earth, right? So you see, like even a quantitative distance is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, 99,000 yojans, right? And it says here Sahasrani, thousands, yojananam Sahasrani navatim nav, 99 thousand yojans. And actually it's even given that 1 yojan is calculated to be 8 miles. So if you multiply 99,000 by 8, it's 792,000 miles is what a person at the end has to travel if the Yamraj Doots are picked him up, right? I just read this very quickly, Sachin. Sachin? Anilji?
Yes, yes. Agreed. 1 yojana is calculated to be 8 miles, and he has to pass along a road which is therefore as much as 792,000 miles. Such a long distance is passed over within a few moments only. The shuttle body is covered by the constables so that a living entity can pass such a long distance quickly and at the same time tolerate the suffering. This covering, although material, is of such fine elements that material scientists cannot discover what the coverings are made of. To pass 792,000 miles within a few moments seems wonderful to the modern space travelers. They have so far traveled at a speed of 18,000 miles per hour, but here we see that a criminal passes 792,000 miles within a few seconds only. although the process is not spiritual but material. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? And actually, when it's mentioned that when a good soul leaves the body, it also takes like 1 to 2 days before the destination is reached. And that's why they recommend, like at the time of death, there's so much bhajans and kirtans and chantings. The wise people spend more time at that time in chanting and doing the kirtans and bhajans and devotion, so that the soul can travel peacefully wherever it's going, right? So all that has true significance, right? And even if it's a material significance, it's that's where the time is spent, because it takes a day or 2 days so that all those things can be done properly. So all the things which we have in our Vedas and Purans, the way they explain, all that really means something for the benefit of the soul, right? Anilji?
जी आदिपरम सगात्राणाम वेस्ट इथ्यो इथ्यो यथोल मुकादिभिः आत्ममां साधनम कापि सुकृतं परतोपि वा. He is placed in the midst of burning pieces of wood, and his limbs are set on fire. In some cases, he is made to eat his own flesh or have it eaten by others. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So it's a truly like conditions of Narak described here, right? Jyoti?
Jivaschanta Yudparaha Shugadrai Yamasadane Sarpavruschi Kadam Shadhya Shaji Jashatma Vaishai Samam. His entrails are pulled out by the hounds and vultures of hell, even though he is still alive to see it, and he is subjected to torment by serpents, scorpions, gnats, and other creatures that bite him. Hare Krishna.
See, like Kapil Muni is continuously describing this, right? Totally opposite to what was described about, the devotion and the pure devotee. And all right, Ajay? It doesn't have English. Can you read it in English or Tarun?
Krantanam Chava Yavasyo Gajadi Bhyo Bhidapanam Patanam Giri Shanghebhyo Rodhanam Kambhu Ghartayoha. Next, his limbs are lopped off and torn asunder by elephants. He is hurled down from hilltops. He is also held captive either in water or in a cave. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Yeah. So see, like after all this happiness of materialistic life, all those things are described, which is pretty interesting. Right? Rinaji?
Yasta Mistran Dhata Mistra Praraivadyascha Yatana Bhungte Naro Va Nari Va Mitha Sangena Nirmita. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hells known as Tamisra, Andhatamisra, and Raurava. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I mean, interesting part is even the hells are described with the names, right? Yeah, you see a Tamishra, Antamishra, and Rora, right? So different kinds of, you see Rorava, Daksh, yeah, Tamistra. So even those are described like even with the names. So it's not like something which is imagination, it's like there are proper things which are given. It even says in Bhagavad Gita, first chapter, it's all things are condemned basically. So, and then the hellish life of Tamishra, Andhatamishra, and Rorav. So it's then confirmed in Bhagavatam. again. So those things are so clearly described in our scriptures. Right? Sachin?
अत्रैव नरकः स्वर्ग इति मातः प्रचक्षते या यातना वै नारकस्यता इहा विलप्पलक्षितः. Lord Kapila continued, "My dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also." Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So here Narakaha Swarga, sometimes iti mata pratakshate. So all that kind of yatnas you also see in this world sometimes. And of course, what is described is something which is really the hellish condition, right? And it says here, it is stated that in any hellish condition, the conditioned soul thinks he is happy. Yeah, like in the previous shlokas, we see, like even if you see a shukar or mosquitoes or anyone, like in any kind of conditions, they don't want to give up this body, right? We are so conditioned and things happy and managing everything. And but that's really not a good way of leading the life, especially the human life. Anilji?
जी एवं कुटुंबम विभ्राण उदरंभर एव वा विसृज्यो हो वयं प्रेत्य भुंक्ते तत्फल मीदृशम. After leaving this body, the man who maintained himself and his family members by sinful activities suffers a hellish life, and his relatives suffer also. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. The important part is the sinful activities. Yeah, doing all these things. Yeah, by not the right kind of activities. Because, again, very interesting purport here. Let's read this, Ajay.
The mistake of modern civilization is that man does not believe in the next life, but whether he believes or not, the next life is there, and one has to suffer if one does not lead a responsible life in terms of injunctions of authoritative scriptures like the Vedas and Puranas. Species lower than human beings are not responsible for their actions because they are made to act in a certain way. But in the developed life of human consciousness, if one is not responsible for his activities, then he is sure to get a hellish life as described herein. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So the life of human consciousness, where we can progress to the spiritualism, is so important. Jyoti?
Ekaha prapadyate dvantam hitvedam swakalevaram kushale tarapatyo bhutadrohena yadrutham. He goes alone to the darkest regions of hell after quitting the present body and the money he acquired by envying other living entities in the passage money with which he lives this world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So this is how Kapil Muni is describing, what happens. And very interesting thing mentioned here is that the great learned scholar Chanakya Pandit says, therefore, that whenever one has in his possession had better be spent for the cause of Sat or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because one cannot take his possessions with him. They remain here. And those things are fact, right? That we know that. And they will be lost. Either we leave the money or the money leaves us. But we will be separated. The best use of money, as long as it is within our possession, is to spend it to acquire Krishna consciousness. Yeah. So that's what is being mentioned, and it's interestingly described in this particular chapter. The opposite of the devotional service, like what happens on the other side, is what Kapil Muni is saying. So I think we're going to pause here, and we'll continue reading tomorrow. Same time, 9:20. And last week was Hanuman Jayanti, so as everyone knows. So we are going to hear some of the Hanumanji Kirtans this week. And we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
आञ्जनिसुताय विद्महे वायुपुत्राय धीमहि तन्नो मारुति प्रचोदयात्। महाबली
गर्भसम्भूत कपीन्द्र सचिवोत्तम राम प्रिय नमस्तुभं हनुमान रक्ष सर्वदा। अंजनी गर्भसम्भूत कपीन्द्र सचिवोत्तम राम प्रिय नमस्तुभ्यं हनुमान रक्ष सर्वदा। अंजनी गर्भसम्भूत कपीन्द्र सचिवोत्तम राम प्रिय नमस्तुभ्यं हनुमान रक्ष सर्वदा।